Because you can't just talk about ideas without talking about making them real. You make them real by building movements. And I'm so glad to welcome one of our consummate movement builders, Harry.
I think I hear a song. Well, timing has always been Harry's specialty. Today we bring you the legendary musician, actor, activist, humanitarian, Harry Belafonte. Harry has spent his life fighting against racism, inequality, violence, bringing about social justice. Like his mentor, Paul Robeson, Harry has used the power of music and his celebrity to push for political change. Son of Jamaican immigrants, grew up in the streets of Harlem in Jamaica in the 50s, spearheaded the Calypso craze, became the first artist in recording history to win, a million-selling album. This is for the young people in the room, Harry. We have to pay them some respect so that they will know who they are amidst, not that they don't. I suppose, really, the most famous face in the world today. And today we bring you the mind behind that face, the remarkable, inspiring Harry Belafonte. Harry, we're talking today about the change agenda, what needs to be changed, and what inspires you, what you've seen that gives you hope. And hi, Pam.
Well, first of all, let me just, I'm very happy to be with my colleagues on the panel and to see all of you wonderful people. And just wherever I go and I see us in motion, I feel that somehow all that has been invested in trying to make things better than we are experiencing was well worth the journey. I just left a young lady in New York by the name of Malala. She was being interviewed by Christiana Amanpour for a program that'll be on the air, I think tomorrow night at 7 o'clock on CNN. And she and I were also just in Dublin at the Amnesty International Convention, where she was honored. And I am glad that I have lived long enough to meet this young woman. It is just absolutely stunning that she, first of all, should have survived such an onslaught, that she should have survived such cruelty and such a tragic moment in her life. But it isn't just that she survived it and overcame and didn't pay a great physical price. I mean, by that she's not crippled. She's got mobility. But it's what is in her mind and her heart and her soul. And the courage that she has expressed and the preciseness of her vision for women and for young people and for education. And although she's under a constant threat, I never saw so many, not even for Obama have I seen as many security as I saw for her in New York. But she lives in London and she is insistent that she intends to go back to Pakistan and that she will pick up the struggle. And it is precisely that spirit. When one says what happened to the young and where are they, I can tell you that the spirit is there, they are there. I think media has done much. Well, not all media, obviously. Democracy Now! And certainly The Nation and other media communication systems have kept us informed, but much has been left off the table of information for how many young people there are in the world. Most of my time is spent in the prison movement with incarceration. And as Marian Wright Edelman has pointed out so correctly, that there's no question that it is the new slavery. It is the new system. And the groundswell to build more prisons and the kind of monies being distributed by people like the Koch brothers and all of these secret movements in America has not diminished the voice of young people. I spent a lot of time with Philip Agnew and the Dream Defenders down in Florida that picked up the cause at the time. Picked up the cause at the time of Trayvon Martin's murder, and the spirit of those young people taking over the Capitol and their commitment to change matches every bit of the kind of commitment that many of us had when we were their age and stepped into the demands of our time to make a commitment to change. What I enjoy, too, is that thanks to, in a big way, to technology, all these young people, we certainly make it our effort out of the program we have going in New York, are in communication with one another globally. There's a constant exchange of information. It's being encouraged. A lot of it's being funded, so that there's a dialogue going on that broadens the information, that broadens the use of ideas for how to confront the issues that we are facing. So with that just quick overview, that's where I reside, that's where I spend most of my time. And I am deeply moved. There's also one other thing I'll just quickly say. We have felt the sting of the absence of the voice of culture, the voice of popular culture in particular. And recently there's been a declaration by a large number of artists who are very highly profiled, who we've not quite ever heard from before politically, who have not stepped into the space and say, count on me. And I had occasion to meet with a group in California some months ago when I dared throw a shot across their bow and say that, you know, while America, white America in particular, grapples with the question of the right to own a gun, nobody speaks very much about the carnage of race and what has happened to so many peoples of color who have been affected by the large collection of guns that are in use against us. And I did that at the NAACP the NAACP Image Awards, and they'd given us Springard and Sidney Poitier and others got up and spoke. And we spoke about our time and about the issues. A large number at that, including a young man by the name of Jamie Foxx. You've all seen him in films. He's quite popular among the audiences of the world, particularly young black men and women in the rap culture. And he declared that night to the audience that when it was his turn to be anointed, he said that I came up here tonight all prepared to talk about me and I and me and how I am doing so wonderfully well and doing so much. And then I realized, after listening to what has just preceded me, that I have done nothing. And I am, as of this moment, cognizant that I have filled the wrong space. And 2 days later, he flew out and hooked up with the Trayvon Martin rally and has been consistently raised a lot of money, got to people whom I would never be able to talk to, and has been dealing very powerfully with bringing resources. And he makes no bones about the fact that he needs to know more and wants to know more. So I tell you this just quickly to say that between these young people and between young Malala and people like Jamie Foxx and artists and Chuck D. Well, Chuck D. and the rappers were in a way always there. There's some that we're still still dealing with. But by and large, there's an awakening that I'm very, very encouraged by. And I don't say that from naivete. I've been in this movement a long time. And when I see the real McCoy, I know the real McCoy. And I am just really quite encouraged by what's being said. And certainly with IPS and what all of these wonderful people on the panel do every day of their lives, our movement, our challenge against a deeply corrupt system is on the march, and I think alive and well, and everybody should really be heartened with what is beginning to develop. One last point of view, and I had a meeting yesterday at great length with a man running for the mayor of New York City by the name of de Blasio. And Bill de Blasio, I think, has said it. He is saying it in the right frame of the way his voice should be heard. And I think that he will become the next mayor of New York. Certainly that's our hope. But what he's done in going into the communities with his wife and his family and talking truth to power and speaking about what he sees for his administration and what he will do in the future should not be ignored. And I would hope, because with 1199 and SEIU, in particular 1199, where I reside at the Hospital Workers Union, that's where I live, and there is a movement, and I think that we will be heard from again soon, and loudly and clearly, and in a way that will draw upon what I understand this whole platform today has been about. What were we when we did our thing, and how can we draw upon what we learned from what we did, not just what our victories have been, but certainly from the mistakes that we made and things that we missed. And I don't hold us hostage for a lot of that stuff, because we missed it because we just didn't understand it, all there was at our plate. I'm constantly telling young people, just in Kansas City 3 days ago, a bunch of young students, I just said, the civil rights movement never missed a mark. Everything we set out to do in that movement, we did. We really did. If you go back and trace the smallest of events and biggest of events, we did everything. But then, like I look at a lot of things in Africa, I look at a lot of the great leaders that led that continent to a new place in modern history, creating the nations that many of them created, how they too had a moment when dark times fell upon us. Most of them were murdered and killed and destabilized consciously by the reactionary forces. But even they are on a new quest and a new thrust to look at what they did, where they made mistakes, and regrouping in ways that I think are absolutely stunning. And in a another couple of months I'll be 87, never expected to live that long. I will tell you right now, there's no virtue in aging. And the only joy I really get is the daily knowledge that I know that Sidney Poitier is 8 days older than I am. But when I looked at our colleagues in Ireland and what Amnesty did and what was said among all the young people there, and once again Malala et al., I'm just delighted to still be up here and working it and looking at it and being with my comrades.
Harry, since my grandmother lived till 108, I'm glad you're going to be with us for another generation. I just want to say that. But I wanted to get your assessment of both President Obama and the movements that elected them, where you feel they need to be today. But start with President Obama.
Let me approach that question this way. Barack Obama promised us nothing. I don't know how others feel about that, but when I look at him and I look at Bush and I look at Clinton and I look at all the presidents since Roosevelt, very few people promised us very much, including the Kennedys. What made the Kennedys so historically important was really what we did that forced the Kennedys to do what they did. We helped them make history. And I think one of the things clearly absent in Barack Obama's reign has been the absence of the left, the absence of progressive voices to really take the charge to him. We did not push him. We did not make him answer us publicly, answer us privately. In our ways, we didn't really put the question to him. And I think that had we done that, he might have turned out to make a much greater contribution than he is making or has made. I don't think it's too late. I think that there are a lot of things that can still happen. I'm interested in listening to him speak because more than once, not with the kind of passion or as emphatically as I think some of us would like to have heard or have been used to hearing leaders that we approve of speak. But he said, in fact, go out and make me do it. That's that famous quote from Roosevelt when A. Philip Randolph met with him, and he invited A. Philip Randolph to talk about the ills of the country and what was going on with race back there in the 40s. When Eleanor Roosevelt brought them both to dinner. And Roosevelt listened to A. Philip Randolph articulate a number of things about what was wrong with the nation, wrong with the Negro people and the movement of the sleeping car, Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. And also clearly told Roosevelt that he felt that Roosevelt did not use the bully pulpit as fully and as powerfully as he could. And Roosevelt said to him, and Mrs. Roosevelt told me this, the story's been used many times, and you know, when things become a myth and bigger than life itself, you kind of lose it. But she, at a dinner that she had many of us at, told this story. And when A. Philip Randolph was through talking, Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, there's nothing that you've said that I can disagree with. And I know that I must do more. But I must ask of you one thing. From all that you said here, would you please go out and make me do it? And I think that go out and make me do it has been said also by Barack Obama and in not quite such passionate terms and as clearly as some of us would have liked to have heard him say it, but he said it. And I think that he can be pushed and we should push. And I think there's a political movement out here. When I look at guys like de Blasio and others around the country that are running for office on a lot of different levels of governance, there is much that we can do. So having said that, I just don't want to take us off the hook. Everybody's busy saying what he is and what he is not. And I said, maybe what he is what we made him, or what we refused to do to push him to what he could have been and should be and still can be. But there's no question that there's something that Dr. King used to lean on, and part of what lit my fire with him was that it's clearly a loss of the moral compass to look and to see drones and to see war and to see incarceration, not only in our foreign policy and all of those things that are just absolutely shameful, but even here in America with the largest prison population in the world and our young children and particularly children of color, I don't think our president has been as forthright and as aggressive. I said to a friend of mine just the other night, when they defend him, I said, well, he may be a great negotiator. When you talk about the narrow space of cultural compromise, political compromise, I said, but he has not led us. He's not given us the kind of inspiration that we'd all hoped we would get. And I think if we can, in these last few years that are left, and the election coming up, that we can dig in and push the agenda and push the events before him in a far more vigorous way, I think we might find that there may be some place in him to become more awakened to what we are struggling for.
On this 50th anniversary on the March on Washington, Harry, what do you think we don't understand or isn't conveyed to the public about Dr. King, a man you knew so intimately? What you learned from, what inspired you in his more private moments?
I think that those who have spoken in his name and have tried to interpret him for the generations that have been coming along have wholly missed the mark in really defining Dr. King as one of the most powerful radical voices of our time. His radical thinking, his radical thought, his radical analysis, his deep concern about decisions that had to be made and things that had to be done, the commitment that he made to the struggle of the peoples in Vietnam, and that he's made in all of the wars of tragic import that he stepped into. We never speak to that. We never speak to the fact that, yes, he was in fact a socialist. He had deep socialist ideals. He believed very deeply in the corruption of capitalism. He spoke very clearly and precisely about how we had to be vigilant about the military-industrial complex. He said so often. And if you go back into speeches and re-examine, I have a collection of a lot of the things that he said. As a matter of fact, I keep his voice alive in my computer, because even in my own moments of dilemma and what to look at, I just tap the button and his voice comes up. And although I've heard the things he said 1,000 times, just hearing him say it again reminds me that where he was and how on point. And I think that we have blurred the fact that we've muted the beauty and the right to radical thinking. Just a couple of months ago, the Ford Foundation gathered together a large conference of foundations and philanthropists. And while there was a lot of self-anointing going on, when it came my turn to speak, I just said, I got to tell you that I guess there's been some things you've done that can be considered as decent effort. But I tell you the truth, I find that more than the right, more than the Koch brothers, more than all the stuff we face, I have found that you are perhaps the biggest problem. Because in your funding practices, what you've really done is that you've crushed radical thought. You've not encouraged it. You've not put resources where the radical thinking can have a broader canvas to reveal itself and to express itself and stimulate people into thinking outside the box. And that's what Dr. King did every time he had a platform. Most of the time it was quite eloquent, and sometimes he maybe had to go back and think things over again, but that kind of radical thinking and the circle of people around him whom he encouraged to embrace radical thought was not only a pattern in our time, because we had a great radical group in the labor movement. We certainly had in the Native American movement with AIM and all the rising forces, and certainly in a lot of instances, perhaps more at the forefront than we realize was what women did, black women in particular in the South, but eventually all women, and what the civil rights movement and what they did in the civil rights movement to enhance the rights of women. All of that radical thought, all that radical combustibility was at and we just muted that and stepped on it. And as a matter of fact, it's in that frame that Barack Obama dwells. He has not given us a truly radical image of what our time is about and what we should be doing. But if Martin were here now, he would encourage us to go back to radical thought, go back to square one, take a look. A lot of young people whom I speak to as I referred to just at the beginning of this, I say to them that, John Lewis and Diane Nash, and those kids were 19 years old when I met them. They were 18 and 17. Diane Nash was not only 17 and a half, but she was also with child, leading the Freedom Bus charge. And they are absolutely surprised, and you can almost hear a gasp when they hear, wow, you mean that guy that I'm looking at now that's 60 years old and sitting in the Congress, or Julian Bond and others, they were 18? I said, yes, and incidentally, I was only 26, and Dr. King was 24. But it's just really something quite touching that that youth, that age, that those minds should have been so engaged and brought so much to the table. And all the thousands of students that belonged to SDS and all of the things that we had going. I mean, the opposition was very clever in how they moved in, became divisive, and spun us off. I always just make this observation. We fought for the right to vote, and when people got the spirit in places where we had never voted before, the great question question for them was, what are we voting for? And who are we voting for? And the only people that could be really trusted in many ways to articulate something that people could believe in were those who had led the movement. And many of the people who were grassroots, who led the movement, left that environment of care and practice to go off and to try something they'd never tried before. How do you get to work as an elected official? What do you do with legislative commitment? What do you do with a Congress? How does this work? And I know that I certainly encouraged a goodly number and financed them and went out and got friends to really support them, that they should get into this space that we just created. And when the opportunity opened up for employment and people to move into places in industry to take over and shape a new future for what was going on in the business community, we were a vacuum cleaner that took off so much of the leadership into these new places, and we left our homes unattended. We left the things that we were traditionally so clear about were no longer being nourished and serviced, and we didn't create and pass the baton on to enough young people to fill that void as others went off and did things. I certainly left the movement to become more deeply engaged in Africa with Nelson Mandela and the free apartheid movement, and all of a sudden that took its toll, not for what we achieved, but for what we had to leave to go do these new things and weren't as mindful as we should have been. I think in many ways we've been a little bit harsh on ourselves in the understanding it wasn't something we did out of evil will or negative thinking. It was a set of circumstances so commanding, so compelling, and trying to fill all of this huge space of things that had to be done took its toll. Well, now we're regrouping, and we're back, and we're at the threshold, and I am happy that there's a lot of young people around still ready to take up the charge.